Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Time to Calibrate podcast. I'm Mark Levesque, writer for Warner Mound. Joining me today are Bob Allaby from the Time to Go Timepiece and Travel YouTube channel, and Brent Robillard from the Calibrated Wrist. We also have a special guest and a personal friend, Andrew McLean from SeL Instruments. How are you, gentlemen?
Good, Mark. Good, Mark. How's it going?
So just like all watch podcasts, let's start with the wrist checks. Andrew, what's on your wrist?
I'm wearing an Omnidiver Mark II automatic.
Super cool. What about you, Bob?
For me, I have the Momentum C Quartz. One of my grab and go quartz watches, especially on the weekends. Canadian brand, and was famous for being worn on the first 2 seasons of Magnum PI.
I love that piece. I have the Aquastar Deep Star Diving Chronograph. That's the one that was released in 2020, and I have it on a gray NATO this morning from Artem Straps. What about you, Mark?
I've got my Hamilton khaki navy scuba, the white one that I got in Greece this summer. I hadn't worn it in a while. I wound it up, put it on, and instantly was teleported to Greece and the waters and the white buildings and the cliffs, and it's just a great watch to wear.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, Andrew, you and I go back a while. I think we started talking maybe 8-9 years ago, maybe. One of the things that really attracted me to your company, or the thing that really got me interested, is you posted a video on Instagram where you had tossed your watch onto a shop floor. And I had called it nightmare fuel. And I think you found that funny. And you and I have been talking ever since, chatting about supercars and your race car in particular. So we had a lot of things in common and been friends ever since. Now, I know that I think we talked before, you had some kind of Canadian roots, or you'd lived here for a while. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. My mother's family and my mother are from Memramcook, New Brunswick, and then immigrated to Boston, Massachusetts. So my mother is French-Canadian. Ironically, both my brother and I almost failed French in high school. I think it's because my grandfather was so insistent that they learn English when they moved here. And so we were actually never taught French at home, despite my mother being totally fluent in French, of course.
Yeah, it's a tough language, even for a French-Canadian in school. It was rather difficult. So I understand you have a background in the U.S. military, and you were founder of McLean Underwood Company, a private military company. Could you share some insights about the experience and how that led to creation of SeL Instruments? Additionally, how did your background inform your watch designs?
Sure. Okay. So, and I just want to clarify that I was not in the military. I worked adjacent to the military. And McLean Underwood was a consulting firm that we started. It was kind of a shell company, really, to run special projects through. So I worked as a consultant contractor in that sense. So, but running these special projects all over the world, I did a ton of travel. I worked in a lot of kind of austere environments. And the start of SeL was that I broke a lot of watches. And, it started with like the common stuff you'd expect, spring bars, whatever. But I also shattered crystals and I lost bezels underwater. And so that really, I guess the start of SeL was really just this sort of almost philosophical approach to like, okay, like, what if I could make, a watch for me? And really, at that point, I wasn't even thinking about a company. It was really just a project for myself. If I made the ultimate list of what would the ultimate dive watch be, the ultimate tool watch to me, and I kind of made this list of features. And as I was breaking these watches, I started disassembling them and looking at how they were built. And I realized that, kind of regardless of price point, a lot of these watches are basically built the same, right? And, differences in movements and obviously the aesthetic differences and so on. But like, when you really dive into, unintended, the engineering in these watches, I was like, I'm spending a lot of money on these watches. They're all kind of engineered the same. And I had some ideas on how we could do things differently to build a, stronger, more resilient, watch, one that was kind of more pleasing to interact with, in terms of like bezel action or the crown. And I tend to, it's like the whole, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And that all started in 2014, and now in 2024, I'm in a building surrounded by CNC machines making watches, which really wasn't the original goal, but I love it. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm hopeful that we can keep going.
Hey, it's Brent here, Andrew. Many of the elements incorporated into your designs cater, I think, so intuitively to the end user. I think, for example, of your shoulder screws in the Omnidiver, how they're operated with a simple standard hex key, or the ingenious wave lock class system, and how it's ultimately so straightforward and easy to clean, or even on the newer watch, the open screw pockets on the case back. How many of these details are derived from your experience, and how much comes from, let's say, research and development?
I would say all the design inspiration comes from personal experience of, getting a clasp like full of silt, or, having to go, like, I remember once I got a watch in the mail that I bought. I won't say the brand. And I had to like drive all around a town that I was unfamiliar with. I was on a boat actually, trying to find a watchmaker who could like size the bracelet for me, right? Because of course it came, kind of generically sized at, large. And so everything that we've done has really just been like, okay, how do I improve that customer experience? So that's why all of our bracelets can be sized with hardware store wrenches. And we, of course, pre-size our bracelets. So we actually have a tool. It's a PDF we send to customers. They put it on their wrist. They take a picture of it. And that allows us to actually pre-size the bracelet. So the goal is always that they get the watch out of the box. It goes right on the wrist. And occasionally we get it wrong. We're not perfect. Last I checked, we're still human, but that's always the goal. So yeah, like everything was always about how do we, make everything the ultimate version of like what we would want, as opposed to like the way it's kind of done conventionally. Another example I always give is, I lost a bezel underneath. I was underneath a boat and literally watched my bezel like, pop off. Again, more for the brand. And I thought, okay, how do we prevent that, right? Like, because that's kind of silly. And in 2024, is anybody really using, a dive watch as their primary, underwater timing tool? No, everyone's using dive computers and so on. But still, just for like design purity, the philosophy of design, it should still be the ultimate tool, right? Like, and even if you're desk diving, and I think that's where SeL appeals to people, is that we've said, okay, like, how do we make the ultimate, dive bezel? So we have, silicon nitride balls. So we have a ball bearing bezel. You literally would have to rip the case apart to get that bezel off. If you're not using our special proprietary process to remove it, it can be removed, but we don't want it to pop off, right? So, I get like some people are like love to change out their bezels, but that's just not what we do. Everything here is about extreme performance and kind of like performance first, function first design philosophy.
Bob here, and we have one thing in common, actually. So I'm originally from New Brunswick, and some of my mother's side have actually ended up down in Boston too. So we share that. But I run a YouTube channel, Time to Go Travel and Timepieces. And when I found out you were coming on the channel, I started searching around there first. And I know it's been a while since you posted, but same as Mark, I discovered your channel, and there's some fun testing videos involving freezing a watch to test the thermocompensated quartz movements, a watch versus Jeep test. And just a question on that. Those were really cool to watch and fun to watch, but I was wondering what type of testing you do to your watches, especially like production models before they go out to the customer.
Sure. So we do all of the, the usual testing for timekeeping and so on. We test the winding, we test, unwound watches, or, static. We test in positions, regulating positions, all that, adjusting position. But we also do, obviously, water resistance testing. The one challenge is that on our deep divers is if we want to do 6,000 meter tests, it actually takes a lot of time to do that. So we have a process where we can validate the seals without actually going to 6,000 meters on each watch. We've considered doing it, and issuing a certificate that says, yeah. But we kind of also know, based on how the case works, it's a two-stage system with our seals. So we have a low pressure set of seals, which are O-rings like any other watch, and then we have a high pressure seal. And so that's kind of our, basically it's timekeeping, it's function. We test torque on, the bezel. We're testing water resistance. We are not throwing our customers' watches against the wall or hitting them with sledgehammers. Unless they request that, like we'll do it if they want us to. We actually have a customer who he just messaged, and his daughter decided for some reason to throw his watch against a concrete floor, just for fun, I guess. Probably do it. Yeah, exactly. But in all of our real destructive testing happens in prototyping and development, like all the engineering development, and we are breaking. On purpose, we're breaking the watches because we want to understand where those design limits are. And that then helps us to kind of validate the engineering, to validate those limits. And it allows us to set, our like actual specifications based on that. But yeah, it's unrealistic, for us to abuse everybody's watch before it goes.
Yeah, 100%.
So you began sketching early concepts for the Omnidiver in 2013. How far did you get into that design process before you knew that you were going to have to build your own integrated manufacturing workshop?
Great question. And actually, I'm sorry, I'm pausing because like you just brought up like 10 years of like, oh my gosh, are we really doing this? So I joke all the time that, I'm like, why did I do this to myself? So originally, the plan when I started sketching, and I just want to like I think our approach is a little bit different. It's always been. The first thing we sketched was not like dials or hands or like anything aesthetic. It was all of these like engineering ideas. It was how do we make a thermodynamic case so it can be fluid filled? Like for example, every Omnidiver quartz that we've ever made is oil compatible. Every single one, because the case is thermodynamic to compensate for the fluid volume change with temperature. That's why we did that. We didn't find that there was a whole lot of demand for it in the market. So basically every single Omnidiver quartz we sell is air filled, but it could be. So we started with all of these engineering ideas. And the goal was that we would take this to machine shops in the US, that we would like develop all the parametric models and blueprints and whatever was necessary. And we kind of did that to prototype, but it was during the prototyping process that I realized that, and it's not, I don't say this to fault the machine shops, but they're not set up to support really small companies and very low quantities. And so I realized very quickly that if I wanted to move the project along faster, that I was going to have to learn how to do this. And so I actually rented a closet. It was like a supply closet in a medical prototyping machine shop. All they did was titanium, like all kinds of crazy, stainless steel alloys. And I thought this would be perfect because these guys know all the materials that we want to work with, all of these advanced materials, and I'll learn from them. So I rented, it was literally a supply closet. And the deal was that I got access to all the manual machines. I had no experience machining anything. Yeah, ironically, one of my grandfathers was a machinist at MIT and made parts for their atomic clock, which now come kind of full circle in a weird way. And so I think that was kind of the beginning of realizing that like we wanted that control as a company, because once we vertically integrated, we now have like this incredible flexibility to respond to the market, to respond to our customers. And like an example I always give is that when we were about to start shipping the D42, which was our original 42 millimeter diver, we posted a picture and I got a bunch of comments back via DM on Instagram from customers who were waiting on these. And they said, like, I think it looks great, but that second hand just looks like a little bit short. And I looked at it and I thought, you know what, you're right. So like in a matter of 3 days, we actually remade all of the second hands, removed them from the watches. We put the new ones on. Everybody was much happier. And so like that, I realized the power of that to respond to the customer and to the market. At any time, like we could just decide, hey, we're going to make an $1,800 dive watch, and in 2 or 3 months, we'd have a prototype out and we could produce that at scale. And I guess the more we've done this and tried to outsource and had challenges, last year was a great example with the Mark II. We tried to scale by bringing another company on board to help us make parts. We got the parts 4 months late. The parts were all wrong. They were non-conforming to our specifications. So we had to remake all of those parts, and we had a massive delay. We emailed all of our customers and said, we're so sorry, but here's what happened. We always try to be as transparent as possible. Here's what happened. We're going to make this, we're going to do the right thing. We're not going to ship you a watch, knowingly that's like, substandard. And we only got one cancellation, and that was incredible. Like that's like what keeps me going, honestly, on some of these days where I'm getting my butt kicked, is the support we have from people. They're so, enthusiastic about the brand. And we have the ability to do everything right when we have the support from our customers. And we're very lucky that we do.
Andrew, I think that I might have been one of those guys that talked to you about your hands. I remember that clearly, that we talked about it being a little bit longer and that you made some changes to improve them, and it was well received. That was pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And we continue to do that. I mean, we get feedback. In fact, we ask for feedback all the time. We post like our prototype parts and say, hey, what version do you like? And I can tell you that even on Exos, our current 42 millimeter release, we're going to make some small changes to the bezel based on some feedback that we got from people, just to kind of like really fine tune that design, make it a little bit more sophisticated based on that feedback. So, and I think in the end, what we've realized now is that there's kind of no going back. We've been kind of spoiled by having our own machines. We just brought in a new high-speed vertical milling center. And there's just, we can't outsource because, and at the end of the day, it's like, they don't share that passion that we have. To them, it's just it's a piece of metal, but to us, it's so much more than that. And so the only way we're going, I think, to, achieve the goals that we want is to do it in-house, do it our way. And that's how we ensure quality and kind of keep the vision true, to the original kind of ethos of SeL.
Well, there is that adage that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. And this certainly is an illustration of that. I want to dig into what you said about communication and feedback a little bit later in the podcast. But before we get there, to me, it's really clear that the term American made means much more than simple brand messaging to you or maybe a catchy tagline. So why is it so important that SeL be rooted in American manufacturing in this way?
I mean, I think, we've seen over, I'm 40, how old am I? 43, I think. And in my lifetime, I've seen the outsourcing of American jobs and American manufacturing. And the result, when we look at sort of the manufacturing landscape now, and going back to the machine shop thing, like a vast majority of these machine shops exist on government contracts. They're doing military work, right? It's very profitable for them. It's guaranteed work. So it makes sense from a business perspective, but we've lost that ability to sort of like be adaptive, in manufacturing, to be high speed in manufacturing. And so we want to kind of, do our part, I guess is a way to say it, to sort of help reinvigorate that. And part of it's just, I guess, patriotic pride. We want it to be American made. So many of the great watches are not made, obviously, in America. And, I think there are a lot of people saying, okay, but why not? Why not us? Right. And now, I think there are quite a few companies who are trying to do great work and are doing great work here in the US. But yeah, for us, it's just, I don't want to import parts. I don't want to buy parts from another country. I won't mention any names. And just say assembled in the US, or, because part of the authenticity of SeL is that it's a small group of guys in, Arizona making these watches. And it's it's part of our authenticity. People can come and if they, we've actually assembled watches right in front of the customer. They've said, "Hey, can I come and watch?" And we're like, "Sure, come on out." They can see their parts being made in our machines. And that's always been kind of a point of pride for us because to me, it just feels real, as opposed to sort of this like marketing thing. And I think a lot of the industry exists on this power of marketing, and it is powerful, and there's a lot of money put behind it. But when you really dig into a lot of that, you realize that there's a lack of authenticity as well. And to me, that's not an inspiring story.
No, absolutely. That's something I'm sure we're going to dig into a little bit later as well.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Andrew, you don't really have an engineering background, yet your watches are super over-engineered. Has engineering been one of your hobbies, passion projects? Clearly, you guys, you know what you're doing.
Thank you. So in high school, I was an engineering prep student. I was supposed to go to university for engineering. I didn't. I was in the physics club in high school. I went to college. I got a philosophy and communications degree. I was going to go to law school. I didn't do that either. So I guess, I don't know. It's always been, maybe, I guess you could just say like an interest, a hobby, in the beginning. But I've always been fascinated by high precision machining and engineering, and especially performance. So it's not just, the design aspect, but it's the actual like objective performance metrics, is just fascinating, to me. And I think that's probably a big reason why SeL kind of became what it is, because of that focus on, precision and performance. So yeah, but you're right. When we started, I when I had to learn how to do parametric modeling, in high school, I'd done like with an actual pencil, some technical drawings. So I knew how to make blueprints and do technical drawings, but yeah, it was all starting from zero. I mean, it really was like SeL did literally start from zero. It started, my wife bought me a kid's geometry set at the grocery store, like a protractor and a compass and a couple mechanical pencils and a sketchbook. And I still have that sketchbook, and that's how I did all of the original prints. And I took the drawings, to that machine shop that I eventually rented space in and said, "Can you make this?" And they kind of very politely laughed at me and said, "Hey, this is cool, but here, let us show you what you need to create for us to do this for you." And that was the beginning of the journey, was realizing like we had to keep elevating, and we continue to do that today. It's like every day I learn something, and we continue to expand on our capabilities, on our engineering, and our understanding of, not just horology, but mechanical engineering and material science and everything that is integrated into SeL.
That's very cool. And speaking of progressing, you guys moved into a new facility in Arizona, and as a fan, it's been super fun watching the shop materialize, get improve, all the new machinery being put in and all that stuff. Has it been helpful in making the watches faster or better, or what can you tell us about the new place?
It's improved everything. And just for full transparency, before we moved into the new facility, we were in my 3-car garage. So we had, full-blown CNC machines, assembly, design, everything was in a 3-car garage. And of course, it started in a supply closet. So it feels pretty Gucci to actually have our own building now, with like lots of different rooms, and that has improved everything. Our process, flow is so much better. The building's set up to support that. We have rooms that are dedicated to various processes like finishing and polishing. So when we're like grinding, for example, we don't have to like cover everything. We can just grind away and not worry so much about the dust because it's contained in that room. So yeah, that's been a huge advantage. And it also gave us access to more electricity, which enabled us to put in bigger machines. We didn't have the EDM that we have, the electro discharge machine that we have now. The high-speed VMC that we just got, vertical milling center, wouldn't have had that capability either. So yeah, it's just been huge. And we have a beautiful room with 2 workbenches that we're hoping to put 2 watchmakers at. If we if we can get somebody to move to Tucson. But that's been a bit of a challenge too, because everyone's like, hey, cool, so you guys have a job? We're like, yeah. And they're like, where is it? We're like, in Tucson. They're like, oh, it's really hot, right? We're like, yeah. For the year, it definitely is. And that seems to be a bit of a challenge. So I haven't quite figured out how to overcome that yet, but we're still working on it.
With the job ad, you take a picture of your air conditioning unit and you put it with the job ad.
Exactly. Yeah, we actually have a dedicated AC just for that room. And it works great. And the view is beautiful. Palm trees and you'd never know it was 118 outside.
Oh, man.
So my first real job this would have been in the mid 90s. I was 15 or 16 in New Brunswick, was working at a machine shop. We were building fire trucks. So they'd bring the cab in on chassis, we'd build the rest. I was just doing basics, cutting brackets, that sort of thing. It was much more analog than your machine shop by the sounds of things, but we would occasionally get other projects coming in. And I was curious if you use your shop to work on non-watch related projects as well, or if ever you're using your shop to work maybe with other brands to manufacture parts at all.
So yeah, we've actually done both. The only parts we've ever, at least to date, that we've ever made for profit, we made Lamborghini engine pulleys for a company in California. They I know them, and they said that they had a supply challenge, and he was like, his name's Mitch. He goes by Lamborghini Doctor on Instagram, great guy. And he was like, is there any way you could make these for us? And we just happened, the lathe was not running anything at the time. And I said, sure. So we made Lamborghini engine pulleys, which was super fun. Right now, we have several projects in our pipeline. So we have a kind of a separate sort of division, I guess, of the company called Tempus Ghost. And it's kind of like our skunkworks. And we have a couple development projects in that pipeline currently that would involve us making parts for other watch companies. But that's definitely something we want to explore because we have the scale to be able to produce for other companies. And, my goal is to keep the machines are happy when they're running. They stay lubricated, they stay clean. So our goal is to always keep the machines running. And so I look at that downtime and I see, profit potential for the company, but I also see our ability to sort of integrate, more deeply into the industry, make partnerships, collaborate with other companies. So that's definitely something that we're focused on. We had experienced in the beginning a reluctance from other companies to help us. And I can understand that, from a competitive perspective, but we're trying, we don't want to be that type of company. We actually think that everybody can kind of has their place in the industry. And so we're happy to work with, whoever, unless it's like a direct competitor, in which case we'd say, okay, let's just do a collaboration then. You do what you do best, we'll do what we do best. We collaborate and, we might create something amazing.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm going to apologize in advance for the complexity of my next question, Andrew. So in 2016, when you launched the Mark I, you said that you set out to realize your personal vision of the holy grail for dive watches, but that over time you realized you had, and I quote here, you had a conversion problem that could be quantified to exactly 4.5 millimeters. So I understand a lot of people were saying 46.5 is a little bit too big for me. I'd really love to see this in 42 millimeters. Now, a lot of other people would have reacted differently to this. Some might have said, hey, damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead, this is me. Others might have rolled over and produced a watered down iteration of the Omnidiver. But you followed your own ethos, which, it kind of like your tagline, we're not in the business of easy, we're in the business of ultra performance, and thus the D42T. Can you tell us a little bit about the balance that you strike between listening to customers and to criticism and realizing an uncompromising vision anyway?
Sure. Wow. Let me digest that for just a second. It's true that we, or at least as long as I'm in charge, we always want to stay true to that core principle that we are all about function and all about performance. And I think Exos, which is the evolution of both, it's sort of a marriage between the D42 and the Omnidiver Mark II. that we then took even farther by introducing, the Labyrinth Flux, which is like a whole new thing for us. So, what was the question again?
Basically, how do you take people's criticism and people's ideas, because you really do commit to sort of two-way communication with your customers and your enthusiasts, and yet still you manage to produce something that is very much SeL, very much still your vision?
Okay, yeah, thank you. The criticism's hard on a personal level for sure. It's always hard, right? To take criticism, but my focus, both personally and professionally, has always been, it's better to take that criticism head on and use that as personal or professional development. And that's exactly how we run the company too. So we actually want that feedback, positive or negative. That's how we improve as a company. Ignoring that is not just bad for our own development, but it's really bad for business. And we want people to say, wow, that's cool. I reached out to those guys and I said, I wasn't happy about this. And they were like, cool, send it in. We'll change it. We'll fix it for you. Or we'll design a whole new product that, better suits what you've asked for. And it's, I guess, an exercise in sort of like distilling out from all of that feedback. The first thing, like I'm not an emotional communicator. So I'm very good at kind of being able to ignore, all the emotional component and sort of focus in on what is the objective, like, fact in this feedback, like what can we use to improve, or what can we use to change? And so, yeah, it's about making that list and then sort of synthesizing a solution that says, okay, I can check most of those boxes. We can make it smaller. We can make it even better. We can make it more anti-magnetic. We can make it more shock resistant. And then saying, okay, how much of this can we possibly put into one box, so to speak, or in this case, a watch case. And that's always the approach. And I think that's why every evolution of our products has shown not just that like we're making something different, but we're making something that's more advanced. And both in ways that people can see readily and also in ways that they'll never know. There's a lot inside of the watch that every time just gets better. And it's like Tesla, right? Like, Elon did the demonstration where he threw the ball at the window and it shattered, right? But they figured that out, and we're the same way. We've had lots of failures. Most of them, happen here in the workshop, thankfully. But we've had some in the real world too. But we don't shy away from that. We're like, okay, cool. Like, this is a learning point for us. What did we do wrong? Did we ignore a part of process? Did we not engineer it correctly? And that's, we always apply that feedback to drive the company forward and also just evolve, everything that we're doing. So, I think that's one of our biggest strengths, actually. And that's what we're hoping eventually will lead to, a huge scaling opportunity where, like, an investor or something will look at the company and say, wow, you guys have this incredible philosophy. You're doing incredible stuff at a really small scale. What if we, infuse money in the company and we let you guys continue doing things the way you're doing, but we do it on a bigger scale? And that's really what we're driving toward at right now is working on that scaling, but without losing sight of, our core values. And the only way that will change is if they get rid of me. So as long as I'm here, over my dead body is the phrase, right? So as long as I'm here, that's the way it'll be.
I think the operative word you used there was evolve. And that's my impression. A lot of people can change up what they're offering, but change isn't quite the same as evolution. And I can really see the evolution in what it is that you're creating. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I wrote about the oncoming Omnidiver Exos 42. It's basically a smaller version of your bombproof Omnidiver. It's small, but that's relative. It's still a 42 millimeter watch, yet it retains immense water resistance and a whole bunch of other goodies. You mentioned the Labyrinth thingamabob. Can you tell us more about the Omnidiver Exos? I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I'll start with the thingamabob. So one thing that Omnidiver Mark 1 and Omnidiver Mark 2 did not have was enhanced shock resistance. We had standard shock resistance from Inca Block, which is great. It's a great system. However, as we do at SeL, we were like, okay, cool. Like, been there, done that. Like, what's next? So we thought, what if we can isolate the structure of the movement, the dial hands within the watch case, where it's actually floating within the watch case. And so that was kind of the beginning of the development for Labyrinth Flux. So it really is, it's a combination of two things. Labyrinth is the shape of the shock isolation system. It's a single piece. We have a special machine that allows us to do that. So it is a single piece, like shock resistance system. And then Flux is a reference to magnetic flux because it allows us to integrate also enhanced anti-magnetic properties as well with that same system. So that's, we as we always do, we started on the inside and worked our way out. On the outside, what you see is a 42 millimeter version of an Omnidiver Mark II, with some changes, obviously, necessary to reduce the size. But we wanted to keep the dial in the hands familiar because the feedback we got was people said, I love the Mark II, the 46 version. Can you make it smaller? So on the outside, we really wanted it to look as close to the 46 as possible. But, because it's an opportunity. Every time we make a new product, it's an opportunity to evolve. So we did Labyrinth Flux, huge change. There are also some really like hyper technical stuff that we've changed, in terms of how we're assembling these. We're using bigger balls, for example, in the bezel. We have a new process for the crystal. So I don't know how much I'm allowed to go into this. We don't mount our crystal.
You're allowed to do whatever you want.
Well,
you're the boss.
I know. Yeah. And violates. we have patents. We have provisional patents filed right now. So there's.
Oh, come on, you're among friends.
A million friends.
Not quite a million yet.
Well, it'll happen. So we don't mount our crystals the way most companies do. There is a difference in the way we do it between Mark II, Omnidiver Mark II and the Exos, but they are still both different from the conventional way. And that's why we always caution any watchmakers that are working on our stuff to contact us before they even open the case. Because, for example, with an Omnidiver Mark II or Mark I, if you remove certain components, you will not be able to get them back in without our proprietary fixturing that's required. It's a high pressure press. It's like hyper precision. But anyway, we've done a lot of stuff like that too with Exos. But really, we wanted Exos to kind of check all of the, I guess, like the design ethos was really about environmental protection, right? And so we looked at water resistance, magnetism, and shock, because those are really the three biggest factors. Aside from temperature, and I mean, maybe someday we'll put like a little nuclear reactor in there with a heater to maintain like a perfect temperature or something. But until we do that, that's really the trifecta for us of environmental protection. And that was the heart of Exos.
That's cool. Did you notice the amount of negative comments we've gotten on that article on Worn and Wound? I write maybe 2 to 4 pieces a week for them, some of them uncredited. And I very rarely ever get comments on anything, or most of the articles, and especially negative ones. It's very rare. I think this means you're onto something, right? When you see negative comments, it's usually the loudest voices. The people who are happy about things don't usually comment. So I'm thinking if we've got 4 or 5 negative comments, you probably have hundreds of positive ones there. What do you think of that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a couple things. The one thing I've learned a few things since we started. Number one is that those, like the hyper negative kind of troll comments, never come from people who will become our customers. So we tend to just ignore them. But I think the bigger takeaway is that we always intended to challenge the industry. Kind of the corporate term for that is disruptive. The marketing term, and I think what happens when you challenge people's either conventionally held beliefs or, even their like kind of passion for a brand, you kind of draw out these brand loyalists, and they don't like that you're challenging. Like they're, because the thing that they have that they hold so precious, right? We might force them to consider, hey, maybe you should kind of consider I'm trying to be as polite as I can, but when we force that comparison, I think we upset people. And I think that we are highlighting how a lot of the industry is driven by hype, and it's driven by marketing, and we're actually doing things differently. And so, yeah, I think that's just kind of a natural human reaction to seeing something, and you want the thing you have to be awesome. So it's like, that thing can't be awesome, right? Like they don't want it to be awesome. Even if it's objectively awesome, and we're like, no, here are the numbers. Like we can show you why it's awesome, and they'll still find an emotional reason why none of that matters. But yeah, it's always interesting. I can tell you, like when we first announced Omnidiver Mark 1 on Instagram, the only reactions we got were negative, and it was instant. And we were pretty bold about, our claims, and we were bold about what we said. And it is also, people hear you say something like, the highest performance, or, whatever, like some kind of marketing thing. And they think, oh yeah, right. Everybody says that, right? Like how true could that be? In a lot of cases, it may not be true. In our case, that's why we've always tried to prove it to people. Like, no, like really, it actually is, like, because our entire existence is about objective performance. Like, that's why we smash our watches with sledgehammers, and why we build a, 20,000 PSI hydrostatic test chamber. I'm pretty sure we're the only watch company in America that has one of those. And we had to build it because you can't just go buy one. So we built it. But it was all about, creating that authenticity to back up our engineering approach, which is intended to be, 100% like real. Which sounds weird to say, right? Because you're like, well, you hope everyone's doing everything real. And I'm not saying that they aren't, but I'll just leave it right there.
So obviously the watches are very over-engineered, and I highly suggest to the listeners, it was quite the experience for me just to check out the spec sheet on the new Omnidiver. There's so much happening. There's no way to cover it all here, but it was mind-blowing. One thing I had a question on, I keep reading about the ball bearing bezel piston indexing system. Could you explain a little bit how that works, if that's possible, if there's no patent issues with that? Or
yeah, that one's super in the open. So when my bezel fell off, and then subsequently the replacement fell off too, although I wasn't underwater when that happened, I got it from the manufacturer, who I won't mention. I actually think they're a great company. That's why I don't want to like denigrate them. They're an iconic company.
Yeah,
I respect them. It just wasn't the right thing for me, right? It wasn't the right thing for my life. Anyway, when that happened, that was the first time I saw how bezels are indexed, right? A unidirectional bezel. And it's typically, it's just a click spring. It's a really thin steel. It's a stamped steel part. It's very thin. Then they bend up these little tabs, and those tabs interact with basically like gear teeth that are kind of underneath the bezel. So I was like, okay. Those, they wear out, they, lose shape. And I just thought, I want something stronger, particularly because, and again, this is where we get into like this engineering that a lot of people might argue isn't necessary, but that's like, telling Christian von Koenigsegg, like, I don't want a car that goes 330 miles an hour. And he'll say, yeah, I don't need one either, but it's super cool, right? Like, but all of these things do have real world benefits as well, right? Like, sure, you may not need 6,000 meters of water resistance, but it also means your watch is 10,000 PSI crush resistant, which is why you can, do whatever you want to. It's like smash a sledgehammer, drive over the car. So with the bezel, we designed a system where we basically have two pistons that are oriented vertically in the watch case. They're 180 degrees opposed, and they are hardened. And so it's a big, substantial, piece of metal. And it basically, just like a piston in a car engine, it moves vertically up and down. And the clearance between the piston and the case is about 0.5 of an inch. So it's very, very tight. That's also how we control backlash, and why when you rotate a SeL bezel backwards against that lock, after it clicks into the position, and you kind of, there's no wiggle. I mean, it's rock solid. So obviously those pistons are spring loaded, and that's what allows the bezel to index. And then the other component was we wanted absolutely no play in the bezel. And anyone who's wearing a dive watch right now, there's a good chance, unless it's a SeL, that if you grab your bezel, you can kind of wiggle it a little bit. Yeah. It's turned into one of those podcasts. Everybody whip it out. So we wanted no play at all. And if you hold a SeL bezel and try to wiggle, there is absolutely no play, but it is still extremely smooth. And the innovation that we did for Mark II was, in addition to the ball bearing, we added a Teflon thrust bearing as well, so that we had both radial and axial bearing surfaces that were extremely slippery. So it's like super smooth, but absolutely no play whatsoever. And it was, part of it was like the engineering goal of making a better bezel, and part of it was just that tactile satisfaction of like high precision. And when you rotate it, it's just so satisfying, and it doesn't wobble, and it's not like kind of mushy. There's just so many bezels, and I always feel bad when I say this, because I really don't want to speak negatively about other companies, but it's just not satisfying when you grab a dive bezel and it's like mushy. That's not satisfying. We want high precision, smooth. So yeah, that was the whole thing about our bezel. And also, it was that there's actually no metal to metal contact between the bezel and the case. So that's another, I don't know, mostly with other, they usually, for the retention on the case, it's usually a piece of like piano wire that's bent into a kind of faceted circle.
Yep.
So you have metal to metal contact. Well, ours has zero metal to metal contact. Everything, the only interaction between the case and the bezel are those balls and the Teflon. And, so that's where we get that like super precision, tactile kind of thing.
Wow.
So Andrew, I've got a very important question for you, probably the most important of the entire podcast. Are you ready?
You want to know what I'm wearing?
No. Probably short shorts. So when is the Omnidiver Exos 42 coming out? When is Gen Pop going to get it? And here's the important part. Will you send me one to play with?
I'll work backwards. Yes, totally. We'll send you one to play with. We're actually assembling the first group right now. We had a few just like little changes we wanted to make. And one of them actually was a hand length thing. So we changed the length of the second hand tip, which, because our second hands are balanced to like absolutely perfectly balanced, we also had to change the tail size. So we're thinking about a week from now, the first one's going to ship.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that one, it's going to a 4-star admiral, former Navy SEAL. He will be getting the very first one. And then the others will follow very quickly. The only challenge with me sending you one is that we've actually sold all of the parts that we pre-produced are sold. So we actually have to now do another run. This will be our scale size. The first run's always pretty small. And then we'll do a much larger. We're planning to make 225. We do have the pre-orders are open, and the way we do those, we try to be super flexible. So what we always tell people is, if you want one, because we don't make a lot, obviously, lock it in, pick some options that you think make sense. And, if you want to change your mind, we don't charge a fee or anything. We will totally let people change options, but we always just tell people pick options, and, get in that queue. Because we are only going to produce 225 total in this next production run. So yeah, about a week, I guess, until it's out there. And we're going to have one. We will be at the Minutes and Hours Watch Show in Austin, Texas. I think it's the second week of November 16th, I think. We will be there with an Exos. We'll also have some of our destroyed test watches from our pressure chamber. Omnidiver Mark 1. We actually have the original Mark 1 prototype, which is a non-functional prototype. And it's so funny when you look at it compared to like what the real watches look like. You can see how we looked at it and went, nah, that's not quite right. We'll have an original Mark 1. We'll have a Mark 2 automatic, a Mark 2 HAQ. We'll have an Exos automatic. And I may even bring an FTX D42 and maybe even an Optex S2.
This is your first show, right?
It is our very first show ever. Yeah, we've never done one. And people are always shocked. Like last year, our total marketing spend was I think it was $376 total for the entire year. And that was just boosting posts on Instagram. We're lucky because I guess in that sense, like we produce in such low quantities that we don't have to do a ton of advertising because we do sell out of everything we make. However, because we're kind of in a more revenue focused model, we want to scale. Our goal over the last like 7 years was really to build a battle tested, scalable, integrated manufacturing company. And I feel like we've done that. We kind of understand all the processes now, and we feel comfortable to say, okay, now we can produce in higher quantities without sacrificing quality. So that's kind of where we are now. So yeah, we're probably going to have to start spending a little bit of money in order to do that. So yeah, I'm excited / nervous to do our first show. I have no idea what to expect. I'm expecting a whole bunch of guys coming up and looping our watches. So.
You know what? It's we just had our first Toronto show, big show. There's 60 plus brands from 17 countries, and I didn't know what to expect either. And Bob and I helped Isotope Watches behind the counter. It was so much fun just to interact with all the enthusiasts and listening to their stories, seeing what they're wearing, and not just shorts. I'm talking about the watches. Like it was so much fun. You're gonna have a great time. I'm telling you, enjoy it.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is just like interact, because we never get that opportunity. It's rare. I shouldn't say we never do. It's very rare to interact with, right, and see people's reactions. One of my favorite stories actually about that, I was at a car show and a guy I was displaying one of my cars, and a guy came up and we had the race livery on it, and he's like, what is this, right? And so I told him, oh, we're a watch company, we're in Arizona. And he was like, wow, that's cool. Like, well, what watch do you make? So I took my watch off and I handed it to him, and he rotated the bezel. And this is a true story, and I have witnesses, and I will not tell you what he was wearing, but he rotated the bezel. And he looked at me and he said, this makes mine feel like a child's toy. And I laughed. We are now building him a 950 platinum and grade 5 titanium Omnidiver Mark II 46 for him. He was like, I love this, but can you make it like, more insane? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I kind of want like, I don't know, diamonds. Or I said, well, we don't really do diamonds, but we can do metals. How about platinum? And he was like, I love it. So if you've seen those posts on he gave no timeline on the project. He was like, I don't care how long it takes to in the background. So, but if you've seen those pictures of us posting platinum parts, that's the watch that we're making for him.
Wow, that's so cool. So your machinery can handle titanium and platinum. I think platinum's even more dense. Did you have to do something to the machinery, or?
Platinum is insanely difficult to machine. We actually have to use diamond to cut. Well, we choose to use. You don't have to, but even carbide is not a good choice. So we actually use diamond like cutters in the machines for the platinum. But yeah, that was like a whole different challenge. In college, I actually took a silversmithing class, silversmithing and goldsmithing. So I had some experience with precious metals, but that did not prepare me for platinum. I mean, and I have immense respect for it because of like experiencing it. I understand why it's like so unique. It's just incredible. It's an incredible metal, and it's a great choice in a weird way for a tool watch. Like gold is not a great choice for a tool watch. Obviously you can alloy it with things, make it harder, but platinum is a phenomenal choice for a tool watch, and it's less than gold now. So it's actually kind of budget friendly as well. I mean, relatively speaking.
Yeah, there was a brand at the Toronto show, Atelier Wen, that had a watch made entirely of tantalum, including the bracelet.
Oh wow!
And it was spectacular. It was dark, just like titanium, but the weight, oh my god, it was unreal.
Yeah.
So on to some fun stuff here regarding your Gallardo. I mentioned earlier that it's a race car, not a supercar, and that's because you've done some major work to it. Can you tell us about that? And then do you actually race the car? And do you finally have all the thingies on it?
It definitely has all the thingies. Actually, it has too many thingies. Way too many thingies. Yeah, so it's a Gallardo LP 550-2, which was Balboni was their test driver, and his ideal version of the car was that it would be rear-wheel drive, not like the race cars, like their Super Trofeo race cars were, not all-wheel drive. So they did a special edition. That's what I bought. It was super low mileage. I bought it with, I think, 6,000 miles on it. And then just, I guess, decided that I was going to do all kinds of stupid stuff. So we supercharged it. And so it's about 800 horsepower, weighs 2,900 pounds, makes 1,200 pounds of downforce, full race suspension, roll cage, race seats, harnesses, all that stuff. Yeah, it's super fun. I'm a fake race car driver, so no, I don't really race it per se. I'll do track days, but I actually like the car too much to race it because, racing is so hard on cars, it'll destroy them. So yeah, no, I'm just like a gentleman racer, I guess. I pretend. So I put all my stuff on so I look cool, get some pictures for the Instagram, but yeah, no, I don't actually race it.
I'm not going to try to stray too far from the fun stuff, but because we're talking about the car, a few years ago, you wrote a post, I think it was on LinkedIn, and it was called "Your Ad Agency Can't Beat Our 800 Horsepower Lamborghini Race Car," or "How Analytics-Based Marketing Was Failing Us." So in there, you kind of outline the strengths and weaknesses of social media. On one hand, it's like the best and free focus group. And on the other, it's kind of given birth to these kind of rapacious ad agencies that are promising you everything through analytics. But you seem to have cut through that with authenticity. How do you manage it?
Yeah, that's been a big learning curve for us, is that all the analytics in the world doesn't replace just having a one-on-one conversation with people. And the story I was telling about, what happened at the car show, and that guy's now a customer of the company. That I think people are missing that. I think they miss that authenticity because we're just inundated, right? There's this cacophony of, posts and promises, and it's impossible to cut through. It's how do you cut through that? So we've actually taken kind of an analog, old school approach and said, okay, we're just not going to, obviously we post on Instagram, and we love it. We get tons of positive feedback. We've made some incredible friends in the industry and customers, and, and also, a few trolls here and there, which always but yeah, to a large extent, we've kind of decided to just cut right through all of that and just go analog and, go interact with people. And so that the car originally was okay, how do we get in front of people who are passionate about performance? And I'm a car guy, so my wife was and I always wanted a Lamborghini, and she was actually the one. I was I can't do this. Is stupid. I'm not going to do this. And she sat me down one night and she's like, "You're doing this." And it wasn't even for the business reasons. It was really just, she was like, "If you want this, you do it." But what I realized, and is, it's an incredible personal thing, to meet all of these people because they're so performance focused, and that's how I am too, right? So it's like I found my people in that way, outside of work. But it's also been incredible just to have those interactions. And, for the most part, they all wear the brands you would expect them to wear. And that's totally cool. And I totally understand the reasons why they do. And, it's kind of my everyday, right, is hearing people tell me why they wear a certain brand. And something we started really early on Instagram, actually, as a way to kind of deal with these trolling comments, was we would say to people, it's your wrist. You wear what makes you happy, right? What we do what we do for a reason, and we're very specific about what we do. And if that's not the right thing for you, that's totally cool. We get it. And that kind of had a great effect of kind of, de-escalating some of those trolling effects. Cause it's, after you say something, it's really hard for them to be like, wow, that guy's kind of nice, actually, And so, and we would always tell people, all we're asking, it's totally cool if you don't buy what we make, but at least we just want your respect. We're working so hard, and we've literally started from nothing and tried to build something that, matters. in the watch world. And all we want is people's respect and that support. Again, even if they're not buying our watch, they can still support us and say like, yeah, this isn't right for me, but man, this is kind of cool. It's like just a couple dudes in Tucson, Arizona, and like they're challenging, the entire watch industry in terms of like the, conventions about dive watches and tool watches and so on. So, but yeah, back to marketing. That's sort of a super long-winded answer. You guys can edit this.
Not at all.
The whole thing is going to end up like 30 seconds long.
No. This has been an amazing interview. I think people are going to get some really cool insights from you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I find a little bit like that you really just hit people with truth. Bob mentioned a little bit earlier about the fact that you had once frozen an Omnidiver in a block of ice and then photographed it as it was being thawed. And there was a tagline underneath it that said, "Why do we test our watches to survive stuff you can't? So your kids will have something to fight over." And I thought,
that's amazing.
That's just perfect. Fantastic. Now, I guess back to Mark's fun stuff. Your back catalog, for all of its iterations and innovations, whether it be the Omnidiver, the FTX, the D42, whatever, they have a very unified, almost evolutionary feel like we've talked about. But one stands out as something altogether different. Can you tell us a little bit about the Revere?
Oh, yeah. So the Revere is a gold and sterling silver watch. That actually started as a passion project in the supply closet, which was in Connecticut, by the way. I originally worked out of the DC, Virginia area for quite a while. Then I moved up to Connecticut because I was working out in New York City. And I think I wanted to prove to myself that even though we were making tool watches, and that was really our goal, was like to make a dive watch, like this ultimate kind of like industrial, tool watch, that we could, if we wanted to, like make something different, like make a dress watch. And so, yeah. And I still have, I think like 8 cases. We made a whole bunch of those. I only actually assembled a few. But we still have those cases here. They're deep in the, way back in the back of the storage area. But it was really, and it was fun. And I've often thought I'd like to that's kind of part of what Tempus Ghost is that, and I think it will probably be more tool watch focused, but we have a couple designs like Revere, the 1142, that are a little bit more like haute horology, than our current catalog. But yeah, Revere was a pocket watch movement that we cased, inlay dial, gold indices, and I still have it actually. Well, I have the first one. I have that one. We even made the strap in house. The strap has a sterling silver buckle that we made. It's a equine leather strap that we hand sewed in house back when we were like, yeah, we're going to sew all of our straps in house, and then we realized how time consuming that is. So.
Well, we'll definitely put a link up to it in the show notes because it's really worth taking a look at if nobody's ever seen that before.
Yeah. So SeL, we've talked about scalability, the future, and so forth. What can you tell us about maybe watches in the pipeline? Is there anything beyond the Exos that maybe you can share with our podcast? Something that we look forward to the future?
Sure. Yeah, we actually have a chronograph. Fully designed. It will probably blow people's minds if they saw it and didn't realize it was from us, because it has the performance DNA of a SeL. It is a diveable chronograph. We're trying to go deep with it. So that obviously has been, an engineering challenge. And, in that sense, it is every bit of SeL, but in terms of its aesthetics, definitely very different from what people have seen. And the only reason we haven't released it is that we just haven't had the time to prototype, to fully to do all of the engineering development in prototype. So I'm hoping that with our new machines that are more automated, that I'll be able to kind of carve out some time to do that. So that's definitely in the pipeline. We have a development project for a lower priced dive watch. I can't really say much more about that at the moment, but it's there. So for everyone who's like, man, I love what you guys are doing. It's just I'm just not quite there yet. In terms of price, we may have a solution to that soon, and it will still be our, the challenge for us with the contract was basically kind of a little bit of gentle pushback and saying like, we're not going to cut corners. So if it's a SeL, it's a SeL. And so we actually have some new engineering. Again, I really can't get into it, but we have some new engineering for that too, that solves some problems of, okay, how do we make it less expensive, but not sacrifice what people would expect from us? So that's really all I can say about that right now. But yeah, really exciting. But those are really our big pipeline projects, is just those two things. Well, there's a third one, actually, that's even crazier. I really can't even say anything about that one.
Well, why'd you bring it up?
Okay, here's what I'll say. We have it's a commission, and if we can make this happen, it will be the most insane dive watch the world has ever seen. That's all I'm going to say in terms of like performance.
That's a big matzo ball you just dropped right there.
Like, you heard it here first, folks.
You like conjure up whatever in your mind is the most insane dive watch, and this will be beyond that. But that's still very much in development. So, but it's exciting because I think that the takeaway from that is the reason it's happening is that this person asked a couple much bigger manufacturers, and we always talk about like where we are. We're always like we are in the shadow of giants. That's the biggest challenge for us as a company, is we're in the shadow of giants. And they've done incredible things. They're huge companies, and trying to get people to see us and kind of like open their mind to the possibility that like, wait, like this might actually be kind of cool. That's the biggest challenge we face. Well, this person went to these other companies and they all turned him down. And I know why they turned him down, because there's probably no like mass market appeal to this. But he is just dead set that this is what he wants. And so he came to us and said, same thing like you guys were talking about. He watched our YouTube videos and he was like, this is all you guys do. Like, your purpose built to do that. And I said, yeah, we actually are. That's why we started this company, was to do all this crazy stuff. And so that's really encouraging, that like to see people kind of like connecting to this crazy, design philosophy that we have. And obviously, our normal watches aren't that insane, but yeah, this would be pretty epic. I'm really excited about it.
Well, make no mistake, the normal watches are insane. They're unbelievable. So don't sell yourself short there.
Thank you.
So yeah, Andrew, we went a little long today. We really appreciate the time you've given us, especially since it's the wee hours for you in Arizona. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing where the Exos 42 goes in the future. And thank you for sharing the new plans for the chronograph and your other cool ventures. And please do come back when you do have more about those others. And actually, if you want to give us an update on the Omnidiver Exos 42 later on, see how it's going with sales and whatever you want to talk about, we're here. We'd love to have you.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a great time.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for coming on.
Great to meet you.
Well, that's it for the show today. So thank you for listening, and we'll be back in a couple weeks.
Time to Calibrate is available anywhere you can listen to fine podcasts, so please do subscribe, like, and hit all those bells and whistles. It does make a difference. Until next time, thanks for listening.